realized that my commercial lines business was constantly dealing with producers and their egos. And then meanwhile, I had this little personal lines operation over here, which was maybe about a third of the business, but that just ran like a top and there was like no headaches and it made money. So I called up the buyer and I said, hey, how would you feel about carving out the personal lines and just buying the commercial lines? So I got a chunk of cash and I got my freedom. I was able to jump in with both feet into the film business and I still had a business that, as it turns out, years later, I would return to.
Today, Liberty is over 900 people, $240 million in revenue, number 28 on the Insurance Journal, top 100. You did all this also with zero private equity dollars. As we already discussed, you did 30 plus films in that stretch.
The film business is transitory by nature in comparison to this business, which is a community of people. It's a community of long-term relationships. And so that's ultimately what drew me back in to Liberty, was the opportunity to give service to this community of people.
The growth within Liberty as a whole is pretty incredible. What changed that just caused the rocket ship to take off?
This is a people business. The assets of the business walk in and out of the door every night. And so this is a culture play. This is about creating an environment where people want to be.
So Bill, you have one of the most interesting careers within the insurance space that I've came across. And I've talked to a pretty good amount of people across the space. So to kick this off, I've heard you say before that the universe sometimes gives you a push. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think, the signs are constant that the universe is co-creating with you. I believe that. And I was just talking to one of my associates today, and we're talking about how, first it like throws a little pebble at you. And if that doesn't get your attention, it'll throw a rock, and then it'll throw a brick, and then you'll get buried by a landslide if you keep ignoring it, keep ignoring the signs. So, yeah, I try to be mindful of what the universe is trying to tell me in any given moment.
I've heard you share this great story, and if you could walk us through it now, that would be amazing. About when the universe gave you a push, when you almost sold the agency. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, this was years ago. This was back in the early 2000s, and I'd started the agency from scratch, just with a desk and a phone, and I built it up slowly, brick by brick, and then I lifted my head up after a few years, and I had a nice little business. So we're doing about 3 million a year revenue, and I was growing, and I was making good money, and I just kind of lifted my head up, and I thought, okay. Is this it? What else is there to life? Am I just going to continue on this path, or is there something more? And as I looked around the landscape for role models in the insurance industry, I saw a lot of pasty guys like me playing golf 3 days a week. It just seemed like they weren't living with a lot of passion, and I just thought, when I get into my 50s, this was years ago, I want to be getting out of bed with passion every day because I love what I do. And so for me, that meant that it needed to have a creative component to it, because I like to use the business side of my brain and the creative side of my brain. And so, at that point in my life, living in LA, that translated into, doing that traditional insurance broker to film producer transition.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
I didn't know anybody in the film business. I didn't know anything about it, but I jumped in the pool and started splashing around trying to figure it out. And I went through this period where I was like going into my insurance office every day, but I was spending a good portion of my time trying to figure out how to get a movie made. I bought a book on screenwriting, and then I wrote a script, and then I decided to direct this little low budget movie, and that was my film school. And I learned two things through that process. I learned that I didn't want to be a writer, and I didn't want to be a director. Writing is a lifestyle. It's a very solitary lifestyle. I'm too social for that. And directing is an obsession with detail. And the truth is, I'm more of a big picture person, and so that's producing. And so I started to head down the path of producing. But anyway, to get back to your question, I had this period where had one foot in two camps, and what I started to notice was that my insurance business, which had always been, going like this, it started to sort of level off. And then it started to get a little bumpy, a little shaky as I was putting less and less of my personal attention into the business and putting more of my attention into the movie business. And so I just thought, I think I need to have both feet in one place. And so I thought about it and I said, you know what, I think I'm going to sell the insurance business and jump in with both feet into the movie business and see what happens. And so anyway, I went through a process and I found a buyer and we worked out a deal. And then right as I was getting ready to hand over the keys, I think I'd actually already signed the deal, but I hadn't actually handed over the keys yet. And I decided to take a weekend, and I drove to this hotel on the beach in Southern California, and I just spent the weekend by myself, just walking along the beach, just pondering deeply this question of, do I really want to sell this business? And I came back at the end of the weekend, and I thought, and I had decided, no, I don't want to sell the business. I want to keep it. And I want to keep, trying to go down the path I've been going down. And so I went back into my office Monday morning and I picked up the phone and I called the buyer and I said, "Hey man, I'm really sorry, but I've thought about it and I'm not ready to sell this business." And I thought he would understand in my naivete, my naivete. Um, but he said, "Screw you, I'll sue you." And and I called up my lawyer and I told him, and he said, "Bill, you've got to go through with this, otherwise you're just gonna spend all your money giving it to me, and you're still gonna lose, and you're gonna lose your business and the money." And so I went forward. The universe forced me to go forward with the plan, which was the right thing. Although what ended up happening, which actually ended up being the best part for me, and the ultimate right path, was when I stepped back and I thought about my $3 million brokerage. I realized that, and this was again years ago, it was a different landscape, a different time, but I had my commercial lines business and I had my personal lines business. And with my commercial lines business, I was constantly dealing with producers and their egos and their difficulty and trying to keep them happy and trying to keep them on board in my small agency, which is tough. And then meanwhile, I had this little personal lines operation over here, which was maybe about a third of the business. I don't know, 30% of the business, but that just ran like a top, and there was like no headaches, and it made money. And of course, in the insurance business, most people value commercial lines. That's sort of given higher regard than personal lines. And so I called up the buyer and I said, "Hey, how would you feel about carving out the personal lines and just buying the commercial lines?" And then I would keep that, and I would have a restrictive period where I couldn't go back into commercial lines. I think, I don't know what we agreed to, 4 or 5 years, something like that. But I would still have a business. And he agreed. And so that's what ended up happening. And so I got a chunk of cash, and I got my freedom, and I handed over this smaller business that was easier to manage to a buddy of mine who wasn't from the insurance business, but I knew I could trust him, and I taught him what he needed to know, and uh, and he took over the reins of the business, and so I moved forward from there. I was able to jump in with both feet into the film business, and I had some money in the bank account, and I still had a business that as it turns out years later I would return to.
That is super interesting. For a million reasons, but one of the things that what I'm really curious about is, and so you kind of got this push from the universe that you wanted to keep this agency, and you originally wanted to sell it because you wanted to go all in on one thing. And this thing that was kind of pulling you towards it was the film business. With hiring a operator on the personal lines business, did you find, I mean, it sounds like you did, but did you find that that was enough to prevent you from, you went 2 feet in, but you could always take a foot out and put the foot in the other door. How did you actually make sure that you decoupled your energy from the insurance agency and put that all towards film? Because I mean, like, we'll talk about this a little bit, but like you went on to do 30 plus films. You did films with Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks, a number of major actors and actresses. It had a lot of successful films at that. How did you do that? How did you make sure? How did you keep yourself from going back and forth on these?
Yeah, well, yeah, because sometimes they say burn the bridges, right? You have to burn the ships.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that was the case, or that wasn't the case for me. I was able, you know, the smaller business was stable. I had more of a financial safety net because of the money that I'd gotten, and so I felt comfortable and free to make that, full leap. And and the universe rewarded me because it was very shortly thereafter that I got my first real movie off the ground. I'd been working for a while, but I was just hitting roadblocks and trying to get my first real movie made beyond my little film that I made. It was like my film school and I got this movie with Ryan Reynolds made called Just Friends, which a lot of people know is a funny movie.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, once just somehow energetically, once I was able to really jump in with both feet, things started to unfold.
That is super interesting. And look, it obviously was the right decision. Today Liberty is over 900 people, $240 million in revenue, number 28 on the Insurance Journal, top 100. You did all this also with zero private equity dollars. And as we already discussed, you did 30 plus films in that stretch. Um, you know, what I really want to dive into is kind of this newer growth. I don't want to say newer, but you did a lot of acquisitions and you specifically got away from that. And you've always had good organic growth in which we had talked about. So I want to dive into those. Before I do, what made you go back? Was it that you scratched this creative itch and I know I've heard you say that the film industry is very transitory. It's like once you wrap up a film, everybody kind of it goes their own way. But what was it that specifically that was like, I've got it, like I got to go back and I'm going to do this. And also it's like, how did you, what did you want to do differently than what you had done before to scratch whatever that itch was?
Yeah, well, I went into the film business because I wanted to express my creativity ultimately, and I have a creative itch to scratch, but I think through the journey I realized that you know what you do does not define your creativity or your creative ability or your ability to express yourself creatively. You don't have to be a painter or a singer or a film producer. I love that Oscar Wilde quote, "My greatest work of art is the way I live my life." Your life is your creative expression. It is your art form. I love to compare it to a sculpture. We're all sculptors. We're sculpting our life, we're sculpting our experience. We're constantly making refinements to the way that we live our life, the way that we show up in the world, the person that we are, how we present ourselves, how we express our work. At the company, I like to we're all ultimately creative beings. At the company, I like to say, we're all co-creators together. We're co-creating this organization together. And so, once I came to that realization, then it became about community, because I just realized that ultimately what gives me the most happiness is community. And we're social creatures by nature. The worst thing that could happen to someone was that they would be kicked out of the community, because that would mean that would be like a death sentence. Um, and I remember hearing Bill Clinton speak one time, and he was saying the most successful creatures ever on planet Earth are humans and ants, and that's because they have the most cooperation and community. Um, and so, and as you touched on, the film business is transitory by nature in comparison to this business, which is a community of people. It's a community of long-term relationships. And ultimately, that's where I've found the most happiness and deep satisfaction in my life, is giving service to a community, giving service. And so that's ultimately what drew me back in to Liberty, was the opportunity to give service to this community of people called Liberty.
When you got back into Liberty, and you mentioned before, you got it to 3 million, and it was a good business, but you started to go up and then it started to level off. What was the catalyst in this second act? What were you doing to really grow that? Because it's pretty well known, Liberty's had some unbelievable, the growth within Liberty as a whole is pretty incredible, especially, again, without private equity. What was the catalyst to that? What changed that just caused the rocket ship to take off?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I came back in the business about 7.5 years ago, we were at about 11 million in revenue at that time. And when I started to think about the business, I realized that, well, this is a people business. The assets of the business walk in and out of the door every night. And so this is a culture play. This is about creating an environment where people want to be. Uh, and uh, and so I started to think a lot about that word culture and what it means. And everybody's got a great culture, but okay, what is it? What is culture? And ultimately, I believe culture is a feeling. Culture is how it feels to be in the organization, in the environment, with the people. And so then I was like, okay, well, where does that feeling come from? And I realized the foundation of that feeling is in the company's mission statement and its core values. And we had a mission statement and core values at the time when I came back into the business. And like a lot of companies, it was words on a brochure somewhere. I couldn't remember the mission statement. We had a management meeting one day. I was like, hey, out of curiosity, who knows the mission statement? And nobody else knew it either, of course. And so I realized that these things only have meaning if they actually are present in the environment, if people actually are aware of them, if they're actually part of the language of the company, part of the fabric of the company, of how we behave, how we treat each other every day, how we speak to one another. And so it's like a business is a living organism, a living organism of humans. And so how do you really make that more than just words on a brochure? That was, what I started to think about.
So I'd love to get into the weeds on that, but if I'm listening to that, I'm going to say I actually agree with everything that you just said. But if I'm listening to this, then I'm skeptical and I think, okay, that sounds great, right? I think it's pretty well documented that a culture gets everybody rowing into the same direction. People tend to work harder. It's more meaningful. How did that lead to the growth? Was it in the decision making that everybody had? Was it in the effort that they put towards the business? What was it about that led to the real growth of the business?
We started to attract talent. Is very simple. This industry is about talent and where people want to be. And as we started to talk to more and more people, we started to realize, oh wow, there's a lot of dysfunctional cultures out there in this industry, and there was a lot of people, and there remains to be a lot of people who are looking for something different. They're looking for an environment that feels good, that is a pleasure to be in, that is a space where there's opportunity for them to express their creativity and express their entrepreneurial drive and desires. And there's a sea of talent in this industry. It's a massive industry. But there was an opportunity for us to to attract talent, and it was that foundation of creating an environment that felt different.
So I want to go, yeah, I really want to dive into the talent piece in particular. So that makes total sense. So what I'm hearing you say is when we changed the culture, that changed the talent we were able to bring in, the talent just performed at a really high level. Because this is such a people heavy business and it relies on really good people, the better people that you have, the better your business is going to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I always just thought about it as like wanting to create an entrepreneurial platform for entrepreneurs to be able to come and create and be entrepreneurial. And so that's our job.
So I'd love to kind of dive into this. I want to dive into all these culture elements because you guys do some really unique things in just the research I had, and I'm excited to hear it. And what we talked about before the show, what makes this really interesting to me is the whole thing that I wanted to dive into was your M&A strategy. And the first thing that you said was, we got away from that. I mean, this recent growth, which is some of the highest growth years that, well, I should say, probably not some of the highest growth years that you have, but you're growing it, or you're on track to go 25% already this year. That's a
Yeah, that's right. And
that's incredible growth.
that's mostly organic. Yeah.
That's mostly organic. Okay, one, that's crazy. At that size, that is a very high number. Where are you finding? What is your process for recruiting? How are you attracting this talent? Is this talent that you're pulling directly out of college? You're pulling from other industries, so you're getting career changers. Is this people that you're pulling from the industry itself? What does that look like?
Yeah, we're all the above. We're mostly, pulling a lot of people from within the industry at different stages of their career. And we have a team that recruits, and we have relationships with recruiters that bring people to us, and as we have gone down the road, our reputation expands, and we have people approaching us and inquiring and having curiosity to learn more, and so it's been a virtuous cycle, as they say.
Okay, let's get into the weeds on the culture piece. What is it that why so there's the industry people, they've obviously been at different places. What is it that Liberty is doing that others are not that's making it so attractive for them to come to Liberty? Those are my words, not yours also. I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think it really kind of boils down to a couple things. Number one, we're uniquely positioned as a broker of scale that is privately held. There's no PE money, there's no PE grind, there's no public money, there's no public grind. And a lot of people have been in those environments and did not enjoy those experiences. And a lot of the producers that I've spoken to said, my best days when I was at that great regional firm that was privately held, and it felt like a family. And I just loved it. I loved working there. I loved being in that environment. And so that's really how we're positioned right now. We're larger than one of those regional firms, but it's the same kind of environment. And there's only, a couple firms that are in that category, and in the top, 40 brokers in the world. One of them, being locked in, which
Yep.
is, a top 10, and they're obviously a gigantic firm, and they've been able to navigate that path to where they are. But it's pretty rare. So that's number one. And then number two comes back to the culture, right? And it's funny, like whenever I talk to the finance people, it's such an interesting conversation around culture, because you can't you can't put it on a balance sheet. You can't put it on the spreadsheet. It's a feeling. It's ethereal, but it's real. And so, we have created a unique and differentiated culture that just feels different, and it's a different environment, and that is attractive, and that attracts people.
Can you walk us through what are some in the details, in the weeds examples of that culture and what makes that unique?
Well, I mean, I think the foundation of it is really, a philosophy. And I like to remind myself constantly that the truth is, we only get a short walk on this planet. And life is short. And making money is great. And I love to make money and I love to see people make money, but that's one part of the equation. And the fact is, we're dedicating our lives to this work that we do. It takes up the majority of our life, and it's where we express ourselves. It's where we express our energy. It's where we express our creativity, our passions, hopefully. And if you're not expressing your passions and you're not living in your passion, then you should probably figure out something else to do, is what I believe. And so I'm always want to be mindful of that. I always want to be mindful of, helping people find what it is that they love to do. We have this, we love our acronyms at Liberty, and one of them is something we call HABU, highest and best use, and uh, and that's another way of saying do what you love, And so, we're always encouraging people like, well, forget what you can or can't do or what's going to be the best strategy. What do you love to do? Because that's going to typically be your best path for both just your happiness, which is the most important thing, but also probably your career success as well. Um, and there's another acronym that I love to talk about, which it's a joke, but I say remember to do your job. And job stands for joy of being. And the idea is that the first and most important thing each of us can do each day is to put ourselves into a state of feeling good. And then we can share those good feelings outward, first with our friends, our family, our coworkers, the people closest to us, and then further outward from there to clients, carriers, vendors, the whole community. And so I want people to be healthier and happier and provide an entrepreneurial platform. That's the goal of the company. And so, how do we do that? I hired a chief wellness officer named Anthony DiPolito. He's an amazing guy. And, he's a very interesting background. He's spent years studying different forms of psychology like neurolinguistic programming, but he's also spent a lot of time in the jungle doing plant medicine work. He's a gifted healer. He's gifted at identifying and helping people release traumas. And we're all traumatized in different ways and to different degrees. And so, we want to help our people be healthier and happier and to move through their days in that way from that place. And so, some of the other things that we do that are, different is, like I regularly lead meditations for the company and, 20-minute meditations. And on a Friday, I'll lead a meditation, usually, once or twice a month. And it's amazing how many people show up. And I remember when I first started this, when I first came back into the business, and that was something that I just wanted to share. And I remember I sent an email out to one of our offices and I said, hey, I'm going to be in on Friday and I'm going to lead a meditation if anybody is interested in attending. And I didn't know if anybody was think I was just a kook or what, but I just figured, I wanted to put it out there, and so people came, and I led this meditation, and then I did another one, and more people came, and I realized that there was a curiosity, even amongst your rank and file, account manager, somebody who had never meditated before, been exposed to it. There was a curiosity, there was an interest, and so then I went to another office and did that. But then I quickly realized like, oh man, I can't get around all these offices and do this and still do my job. And then the pandemic hit. And that was one of the big blessings of the pandemic for me was I realized I could take this online. I could do it virtually. And so now we'll have 100, 150 people show up for a Friday meditation live, and then others will watch the recording later. And so I think that speaks a lot to our culture and the kind of people that we have and the kind of people that we've attracted, but also just an example of some of the things that we do to ultimately show we care. And it's something a little different when it's the CEO doing it than when they're like, you're bringing in some, outside person to lead a meditation or whatever. Not that many companies are doing that either, but
Yeah.
and so anyway, and then we also do these talks. We call them 20 minutes on cultivating radiant health. Those are co-hosted by Anthony and myself, and we'll have thought leaders come on and talk about things like sleep and stress and gut health and HRV and all sorts of things about different strategies about how to be healthier. And then another thing that I think is really special that we do is what we call our Dream Circle initiative, and that's groups of 10 to 12 people that meet once a month under the leadership of Anthony, the guidance of Anthony, and uh, and the stated purpose of the Dream Circle is number one, to foster connection, but number two, to talk about what our dream life looks like, both personally and professionally, and how to support each other toward creating that. And so, we've had incredible stories coming out of these Dream Circles of people, losing weight, quitting smoking, getting off prescription medications, healing family relationships, finding their true purpose and passion, and so it's just, I get these emails from people constantly, thanking me for some of these initiatives, thanking me for, the culture that, you know, they thank me for the culture, and I just remind them that maybe I inspired it, but we all create it together. This culture is not something that anybody is responsible. It's not like, hey, management's got to do a better job of the culture at the company. It's like the culture is a living, breathing organism. It's a co-creation of all of us, and so if we have a great culture, it's because all of us are showing up in a way that feels good and that creates something that feels special.
When I hear that, and you kind of you made fun of yourself a little bit, saying like, is this guy crazy? Like, wait, what are we doing? And so the interesting, I say this because, I've meditated for years. I've probably spent too much time of my life listening to Huberman Lab episodes, and so I do all the things, right? Now, I do all these things. When I start telling some of my closest friends about all this, it's immediately, dude, I can't even listen to that anymore. I say this from the perspective of, are you trying to create this culture in a way that attracts the people that you want and repels the people that don't fit that culture? Not necessarily mean like you're trying to get rid of the people that don't fit that culture, but are you trying to attract the people that fit said culture? Or is it that you want to find the best talent possible and you feel confident that even though this is going to be different from what they're used to, there's probably something in that recruiting process that gets them open to this to come in, and then, they flourish under their culture? Or is it something totally different?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I would answer that question is I'm wanting to cultivate authenticity. I've heard that, it's said that the highest vibration is not love, it's authenticity, when people are being their true authentic selves. And so, I think what I would love to think about Liberty as standing for is a place where people can be themselves. And I've had people say that to me. I feel like I can be myself here. And to me, that's like one of the highest compliments that anybody could say. And so, these things that I touched on, those are offerings, and maybe it resonates, maybe it doesn't. If it's of interest, it's there for you. If it's not, no, all good. But if this can be a place where people can show up and really be their authentic self, then I think we've made something special.
I when you look back at this, I should say, a lot of people want to create something like this. And the interesting thing is, most of the largest, whether that's brokers or founders or CEOs, oftentimes, mostly, a lot of times it comes from the founder, but they state that it was once they nailed that culture, that's when things really, not, I don't want to say it's necessarily when things really took off, but it's almost kind of like when it cemented the whole company. Like it all kind of formed, like, and it's one of the things that comes up more often than anything from the founders that have built a large business. When I say large, I'll just say over 100 million in revenue. If somebody, that is early on in their company want to start doing this, what is the first, because I'm sure you've had tons of people ask you this, what's the first piece of advice that you give them?
I think I would come back to that authenticity, I think just being your authentic self and letting that permeate the organization that you're leading and creating.
The chief wellness officer is really interesting. Okay, I got a fun side note. How did you get I mean, you're the owner, so you could probably get any of this pushed through that you want. What were those conversations like with the CFO for that position?
Well, it was, it was fairly early. And, after I came back into the business, we were still, you know, a pretty small company. So we didn't have a CFO at the time. And so I was just, investing really my own money into something that I believed in. But, I have had different people come to me along the way and suggest that that wasn't a good investment for the company, and I disagree.
And what I'm curious too, as well, is you built the business to 3 million. You left, you spent 15 years. So you really did go, both feet in. You went 15 years in the film industry, came back. What has it been on, what has it been this time around that has kept you excited and in it? You probably already answered this 700 times, but I'm just curious to hear your answer.
It's interesting. When I think about my life, I think about, I've got my work, and I've got how I give service, and I've got my relationships, and I've got my family, and I've got these different areas of my life. And, this goes all the way back to years ago when I started doing like those vision boards and envisioning, what the life I wanted to create for myself, and each area of the life, and I always, how I express my creativity. Um, and I always like had different areas where I would go for those things. I would like, well, I do my work over here, and I give my service over here, and I have my community over here, and I express my creativity over here. And as I was making the decision to come back into the business and started down that path again, I quickly realized that I was bringing everything into alignment. How I do my work, where I do my work, how I create abundance, how I give service, where my community is, how I express my creativity, all in alignment. And when you can create that in your life, whatever it is, that is a powerful place to be operating from. I was able to bring all that energy and all that alignment into manifesting this vision that I was, concocting in my head.
How did that feel?
It feels good. It feels like powerful balance, because usually when you're creating power, it's through narrow focus, which can often be the opposite of balance. But when you can bring it all into alignment, you have balance and focus, and that feels like flow.
Bill, I can't imagine a better place to wrap it up than that. I appreciate you sharing the full story. I think I told you in the beginning of this, I was planning on going in a totally different direction. I'm glad we went in this direction. You have one of the most interesting cultures, one of the most interesting businesses I've seen in the insurance space. So thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. I enjoyed it. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely.